Hey everybody, Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my Saints Row video game series perspective. Rah! Yes, this is one that I've been thinking of doing for a little bit, and the thing is, I had just finished the Saints Row 2022 reboot, and thought that that would be a good time to kind of talk about it, especially because, we'll talk about the whole series, because it spans the 360, and then of course the third one got remade, well, remastered as well, and then we've got 4, and then of course this one for 1, Series X and all that. And it's just an interesting kind of journey to go through with the Saints Row series, because it was one of the kind of big ones that was able to kind of break its own way out of like GTA clone shadow, because let's face it, the first one pretty much did that, but it really put the emphasis on your player character where you could customize them how you wanted to, going through and doing more kind of gang kind of systems, open world kind of stuff. Kind of interesting to kind of play it into the effect of almost Ubisoft kind of things, except with its own kind of rationale, like insurance fraud, mayhem, septic tank kind of stuff, where you are a low one on the totem pole and get inducted into the 3rd Street Saints. And the thing is, they've been out on their luck, and then you start going in and working with Julius, the leader of the Saints, to go after all these gangs and try and like build yourself up as the preeminent criminal gang in Stillwater. And you get there, you do that before pretty much being betrayed by Julius at the end of this one. And the thing is, this works out for most of the effect in that the combat, now granted this came out in 2006, combat worked out well enough, minigames were enough, you had to go through these minigames and play them on kind of harder difficulties to get more respect to advance for different kind of story missions. Granted, that system gets old throughout the series, and that there are less kind of modifications on it, so you would still have to interact with the minigames. However, the minigames to me were fun enough that I'm like, oh, okay, this is a system I don't mind interacting with. I normally do not like that kind of thing. Well, the thing is, this is kind of another kind of formative series for me of like, oh, okay, because this becomes an important kind of one, especially with the 3rd and the 4th one for me, because of just how fun they are. This is before I started like seeing other games doing the same kind of thing, where you start playing through certain kind of things, and at first, when you're first introduced into video games, you're going to get your kind of touchstones, and you're going to be like, oh, okay, but then it kind of gets onto a knock-on of like the Seinfeld effect, of if you are after Seinfeld and you see shows that do stuff like Seinfeld and you go back to Seinfeld, it's like, oh god, this is stupid. Yeah, they did it first. Now granted, Saints Row hasn't done much kind of first, but I wasn't annoyed by it because I'm like, okay, I understand these mini games are helping me to get the respect and get through. Now granted, it is time padding. Like, I wouldn't recognize that until I'm at my point right now where I've seen all these other games do these things where it's like, oh, it's time padding. However, when we get into the 3rd and the 4th one, it becomes fun for me because it's more kind of arcadey, and it's like, oh, okay, I have fun with this kind of stuff. Whereas with the 2022 reboot, which we'll get to, they haven't really evolved the formula, and it's just nauseating of just like, oh god, especially when you shift to different kind of difficulties, and it just fucks with you a little bit, but then also bugs fuck with you as well. Granted, these haven't been the most like technologically advanced ones, but the amount of bugs towards the end of it, it's like there were problems that had occurred with that one. Granted, I still had enjoyment, but I'm like, oh, okay, this one was interesting, seeing going through with the Kings, all the other different kind of gangs into the effect, and learning and doing all the different kind of stuff that you would do as a gang in this game series, and just doing kind of crazy kind of shit and getting drawn into the characters in the world. 2 is where it shifts out because, whoop, you pretty much, your player character was supposedly dead at the end of the first one. And you're like, how the fuck can you make a second one? Especially with the Saints being gone, because this vastly changes what goes on. Now, granted, this helps into the effect of doing what happens in kind of Metroidvania kind of games where you got a sequel and your character's depowered and you get the world rewritten, essentially. And that kind of happens in various different kind of stages. But in here, you're the player character, you've been in prison, you get to change your appearance again, but you get hooked up with a family member of a former 3rd Street Saints a crew member. You break out, and then you start seeing what's kind of going on. You see that one of the people that was part of your gang was an undercover police officer, and that was chief of police. You see that there's other gangs. The 3rd Street gang's screwed over, so you rebuild yourself back up. But this time, you're the boss. And this one is definitely kind of more of a serious, kind of gritty edge where things are going on. Now, granted, that is important to note because the third one goes crazy-ass shit. Pretty much more kind of violent Adult Swim cartoon. And that carries over to the fourth one. And I understand the demarcation of where more people would be like, I like these two better than those two. And that's perfectly valid. But the thing is, this is where it starts getting kind of nutty because then it kind of like fractures the fan base. Because even though I like this one, the third one and the fourth one, I say fourth one because we'll get to it when we talk about it. But this, you see the boss being pretty much a ruthless kind of dude going through and taking these people out. We get Gat back into effect, which Johnny Gat is a great character. He's a crazy, homicidal motherfucker. He goes through a lot of shit, and you just really start to build with him. This is where the core characters pretty much line up in Saints Row. Your boss character being the central linchpin, Johnny being your lieutenant, pretty much right-hand man, Pierce, and then Shondi, and they become kind of like, I understand that people would say different characters, but I like their kind of characterizations in the next kind of ones. But here, this one definitely goes more kind of the violent kind of route of Johnny losing his girlfriend in an attack by the Ronin. We got Carlos, who had gotten us out of prison, being killed, going after the Brotherhood. We've got, who else is there? We've got another gang. I mean, it's been a little bit. I'm more understanding of what's kind of going on in the other ones. Mainly the third one, and beyond that, let's see. Yeah, the Ronin, the Brotherhood, and the Sons of Samedi, Haitian Voodoo Gang. That one's linked up with Shondi, and having to frickin' fight Neil Patrick Harris, a veteran child. That's kind of nuts. But then it kind of brings the effect that we are introduced to the Altor Corporation, which has been utilizing these gangs to drop property values so they can buy them up and then do redevelopment. And then, of course, it's like, fuck this shit, and the boss takes it over, and it becomes an escalation problem. And the thing is, if people are talking about how the other ones in the series have escalation problems, that's kind of been a whole thing throughout the whole series. I mean, we take over Stillwater here, and we take over Stillwater again, but this time we take over as a corporation, and it's like, oh shit. And that then leads us to Saints Row the Third. And again, this follows in the effect of doing the same kind of Metroidvania thing. Now, the funny thing is, this was one of the most fun games for me that I played, and I really had a fondness for it, but then when I played it again with the remaster, it doesn't age well. So, it's mainly because, again, playing more games, understanding what is fun for me and what's not fun for me. And it's like, okay, I've already played these kind of mini games, and it's just good to be able to play it on newer kind of hardware with better kind of graphics and everything, but that still doesn't change the core gameplay of what goes on with this. However, let's get into this story. So, the Saints have essentially become a media empire now, and since they're a corporation for like a conglomerate kind of thing. They decide to go after this bank. However, the bank they rob is headed by this criminal syndicate, and they pretty much get taken. Johnny is presumed dead in the third one, where we find out he is alive in the fourth one, and we are then dropped into Steelport, a different town, so we got to build ourselves back up and hit the various different kind of operations within Steelport that the syndicate own. And I kind of like this because it kind of changed up the formula a little bit. We got a little bit of different kind of mini games, newer kind of characters introduced. Pierce and Shondi are kind of interesting, though Shondi goes kind of more hard edge because of Johnny's supposed death, and becomes more of the kind of violent one. Pierce is the one that's normally been handling the media kind of empire. So let's see here. Again, the customization. Combat is kind of interesting. You get better kind of upgrades for guns and everything. I do like the gun upgrade system in this one the best. And then the upgrade system for the superpowers in the fourth one's very nice as well. Let's see here. So we get the Syndicate's three main divisions, the Morning Star, led by Loren, and his lieutenants Viola and Kiki de Winter. We got the Luchadors, a Mexican wrestler-themed gang by Eddie Kilbane Pryor, that fucker. And then the Deckers, headed by Matt Miller, who dominate the city's cyber black market. So they kind of go around taking out everything. I mean, you get through crazy-ass stuff. You build up your people within Steelport. You even help out the mayor, who's, let me see, Burt Reynolds. I mean, you have to deal with zombies and shit. You get crazy-ass techno weapons. It's like a Saturday morning Adult Swim violent cartoon. And you're like, what? It's like, yeah. Well, granted, you'd be Adult Swim at night, or like really early in the morning, but it's just nuts. You can play your character how you kind of want. There's rudimentary choices, but they're kind of like the violent... They're trying to balance the violent, lovable rogue as you gather your comrades to just fuck shit up and have a good time doing it. I mean, shit, the final mission, you have to save Shondi and others, and it's pumping out, I need a hero, as you're like blasting through and everything, and you find out that the boss is like Red Jane Austen and shit, which then continues on into the fourth one, which is some interesting kind of jokes. It's like, oh, okay, I really had fun with it because the mini games, the graphics, and the kind of physics and the combat kind of worked out. I liked going through the story, learning about how we could fight these assholes and take them down, and then eventually pretty much take over Steelport and get ourselves back up. And just the effective use of music and action scenes and set pieces worked well and resonated with me at the time, because the first one came out in 2006, second one in 2008, and 2011 this just worked. And then we get to 2013 and we get Saints Row the fourth, and we also get Gat Out of Hell later on in 2015. Now, this is a weird one because this kind of combo pack is a little bit different, but the fourth one is a DLC that was expanded into a game, and it definitely shows. It's pretty much a reuse of Steelport. It deals with some wacky, crazy shenanigans, and actually does a better kind of sequel aspect of like Crackdown more than a Saints Row game. So people being like, it's not a Saints Row game anymore, it's gone completely and utterly fuckballs wild. The series has gone fuckballs wild before, but I agree that it went over into different complete territory. So much so that they had to reboot after the fact because of what has occurred, because the thing is, escalation becomes a problem. When every Tuesday's apocalypse, you have to fucking do something to kind of rise to the effect. So in this, like, the leader has then become the president. So we took over two towns. Now we become the president of the United States, but then we have to deal with an alien invasion, and we get abducted, and the Earth gets blown up. It's like, oh shit, what the fuck? And Keith David was our vice president, and is our vice president, which is funny because he voiced Julius in the first and second game, which we had to deal with Julius in the second game, which is a nice little thing where we find out that he betrayed us, and we get to deal with him on that effect. And Keith David betrays us in here. But the thing is, we get abducted by aliens and essentially put into a Matrix kind of scenario. And you can definitely see how this is kind of elongated out from being a DLC. I really think that it would have been better if this was DLC packs and put into with Saints Row the Third rather than expanded out into a game. Even though I loved this and had fun with it, you could definitely tell with the stretchness of like going around, but you're essentially in the Matrix and you have superpowers and stuff, and then they even create a suit for you to do that shit in the real world. And they parody Mass Effect and everything. You can bang pretty much everybody, and of course you got your great character creator. But I just loved going through with the characters that I learned to love in Saints Row the Third, and dealing with all this stuff of like having this like damn alien quoting Shakespeare and stuff, the Zen. Let's see. And all this other kind of like gameplay stuff going around, like, let's see, Zinyak. And you find out that Johnny Gat had been abducted, and bringing him in, it's like, alright, let's do this shit. Let's see here. Oh, he was only going to restore the Earth. And then gets Keith to join back up with them. And of course you have to do loyalty missions, but they're not really as involved as, like, say, Mass Effect. Now, the thing is, if you don't do the loyalty missions, the boss plans for the Saints to conquer a new homeworld with, like, a Saints empire. Otherwise, the Saints learn that they can restore Earth using time travel and wacky shenanigans, which leads to the Agents of Mayhem kind of spin-off thing, which was okay. It was more of a take on the kind of hero kind of things, and, again, more of the violent Saturday morning kind of cartoon. And that Zinyak has captured several historical figures and placed them in suspended animation makes sense. And he, like, gets Jane Austen, and we find out that that's the game's narrator. And get out of hell, the boss gets kind of kidnapped by the devil, and then you run around as hell as Johnny, which sounds better than it is. It's really kind of bare bones and not really as fun as it should be playing as Johnny Gat. Which is disappointing. Like, I like Gat's character. He is... I'd almost say that he's a slightly more violent Wolverine, if that makes sense to you, where Wolverine's violent, but Johnny's got more of a not a carefree. Like, he's got rage and everything, and he can find fun in things, but if you fuck with him, he will fucking do some crazy ass shit. I mean, he went Hambo Rambo in a damn courtroom in the second one. Which then leads me to Saints Row 2022. Now, I know I'm not going really, really in-depth. I mean, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish kind of things going on, but I also want time to kind of talk about this, because up until now, it has followed the same kind of formula, except for escalation and kind of changing of the story of going from harder, kind of gritty kind of take, which... I mean, I think that they would have been fine with, but I think they wanted to further differentiate themselves from Grand Theft Auto, which does the gritty kind of takes pretty well when it does them well. And people wanted either... You got your two fractured kind of fan bases. You got the ones that really like Saints Row 2, which is that kind of pinnacle of the grittiness. And then you got the ones that like and had fun with Saints Row the Third and the Fourth. Now, fourth, with the superpowers and everything, I understand you have to do some kind of reboot reset, because how the fuck else are you going to go from there? You can't just put them back in a place. Oh, you could destroy all their tech and shit. I mean, Metroidvania shit, like D-Power shit all the time. But that's why they kind of went this reboot kind of route. And the thing is, It's not as serious as 2, so that fan base isn't happy. It's not as wacky as, like, 4, and even still to an extent not as wacky as 3, and the writing just isn't as good. And the thing is, it's like you asked either older generations or younger generations to write a millennial, and that's the kind of core group that we've got here, and it's just lingo and language for certain groups and certain time periods moves vastly faster anymore than how it used to. Like, suck dog, wada, all that kind of shit. You normally, before the internet, have about a 5-year, maybe 10-year thing where, oh, okay, that you could get away with that in a video game. Nowadays, because of the internet and how social media and everything goes on, you get a meme kind of effect, and in a way, how people talk, and that's almost done within a certain kind of span of almost 6 months max. You get maybe 2 years out of certain kind of things, and then when you get through that, it's just like, oh my god, why the fuck are you trying to talk like that? That is what happens with how the characters are written in here. Now, do I hate any of the characters? Not really, because we don't really get enough time with them to really get to know them. There's definitely potential with them, but you get mainly your cringy kind of dialogue, and you're, of course, having to go through the same mini games that we've pretty much been doing before, slightly worse. Like, I was kind of bored of it when I was, like, replaying through Saints Row the Third with the remaster. Not bored, but I'm like, where's your evolution? Because I'm like, wow, hopefully with the new one they kind of evolve it, and they didn't. And the combat's not really as fun. The upgrades don't get kind of as crazy as a certain kind of weapon upgrades for the other ones, and it's just kind of a slog. It's not... I had fun with it to a certain degree, but not as much as I had previously, because I've already played them previously. Granted, new kind of tool sets, new kind of sandbox modes of how to get through certain things. That's good. Kind of like Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal, you get different kind of weapons, you figure out how to get through certain kind of scenarios. Granted, the core gameplay is the same, but you're introduced into different kind of combat scenarios, you're introduced into different kind of story scenarios. This just does the same kind of thing, which really wouldn't be a problem if it was fun to do, but I'm like, I've played better ones than this in the same kind of franchise, and that's worrisome for a reboot to trying to restart this. So, you start off as the boss, again, same kind of concept. However, you're in Santo Ileso, you're with this Martial Defense Group, which is pretty much like Altor Corporation, and then you've also got Los Panteros? Los Panteros, yeah, and then the Idols, which are like an anarchist. Like, the biggest kind of issue is that you get into the effect that the story with most of it is they take buzzwords and stuff like that and kind of trends that had been happening, but don't dive deep enough into them to actually make anything worthwhile. Most of the other kind of gangs that we have dealt with, and even kind of factions to a certain extent in other games, had kind of more care into them. This is just a military complex that you were in a little bit, then you capture this one dude, and then you fail in essentially the next mission, because the two other groups, the Panteros, which are just car meatheads, which you just fight, and it's like you don't even really get much into it, except that they try and like rob a train is their big ambition. And it's kind of weird. This is the latest one that I played that I'm diving more into, but the other factions are more well thought out and well dived into, like the Brotherhood, trying to see what's going on and what makes them tick with their muscle cars versus the Panteros. It's like night and day. Then the Ronin, the different intricacies there, the kings in the first game, the factions within the Syndicate in the third, the aliens that you're dealing with in the fourth one. That just showed how they're like, oh, okay, This needed longer to do stuff. Never mind the fact of bugs and everything kind of going haywire, affecting missions and everything. So you go through, you fail, you get kicked out, you see your roommates, and your roommate Eli's like, no, your dude's like a murder rogue, and it's like, alright, let's make a criminal empire. So then we go through and we do this stuff. We take out the Panteros. The collective kind of gets taken out, but not really. They're the leaders of the idols, who are like an anarchist, anti-capitalist kind of thing, even though they pretty much just take shit and, like, they don't even dive into, like, the hypocrisy that goes on with them. They just, like, do techno party dances and just steal shit. Which I don't mind if you're like, yeah, they label themselves as this, but they aren't really that. And then going into the effect that you have to keep doing certain kind of mini games to get your respect and everything. Well, your level up and get your money, because then you got to do money to then place businesses on the boards, and it's just tedious. I've played other kind of management games in the Yakuza series that were better than this, and even though they were grindy as shit, they were better than this. And if you've seen my perspectives on the Yakuza series, you know how much weight that carries. And you just see certain kind of things. It's just mainly like that they picked certain kind of topical things and just, oh, Eli likes to LARP. Here's a kind of thing for that. Here's Kev trying to get, like, toys from this thing. Here's Nina trying to get her car back, even though it then gets destroyed, and then she goes to fuck up the Panteros. And then we have to deal with Marshall because they get the Saints. And then this Nawali dude kills the Panteros dude, and they're in disarray. We kill more of the collective till it gets to a certain point where they get pretty much knocked out. And then Nawali's like, I want your life, boss dude. And then kill him and put him in a grave because... or her, because you can choose whatever kind of character you want to play. And the thing is, this game starts with pretty much a party for the Saints. They're on top, and then you see your character pretty much buried in a hole. And then it's like the Nawali's like, I won. Like, if it was revenge for capturing in the beginning, I get that. But this, he's like, he wants the boss's life. It's really kind of stupid and just makes him the endgame boss character out of nowhere, because you can either kill Atticus Marshall, the head of Marshall Industries, or you can just fire him, but it's setting up to be like that kind of thing, but then you're just a criminal empire at the end, and you're like, yeah, this is just the beginning. It's like, not really, this is the same kind of stuff, and it's just done in a worse kind of way. I don't like saying that. Like, this wasn't some kind of travesty that was, like, unplayable for me. But it's the same safe kind of stuff that they've been doing before, with worse stories, worse writing, and worse well, not worse characters. The characters had potential, but they didn't execute them well enough to do anything worthwhile with them. So I don't know if they'll be doing any more of these, if they'll be able to do it. I'd almost like to see... I mean, I've liked the Saints Row series, but you need to give them the abilities and the tools to make good stories and good gameplay loops for it. And it's sad because this was it was building itself on its own to stand beyond Grand Theft Auto, and we'll have to see how Grand Theft Auto turns out anymore, because the fucking trilogy was done just slapdash. They've just been hooked on the fucking GTA Online, so GTA 6, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of works out, because I've been a fan of the GTA series as well. But this one, the third one and the fourth one were just really fun games for me. And the thing is, the fourth one was a fun one because it'd been so long for, like, Crackdown. It's like, hey, superpowers and shit, let's rock this shit. And it worked with the escalation of what craziness was kind of going on. And then I was like, okay, a reboot could work. Let's see kind of what works out. And this, unfortunately, didn't. They didn't really effectively use the change of scenery into, like, the Southwest, I believe, effectively at all, because mainly it just worked to hamper the player more of, here's desert and shit where you have to actually put an off-road kit for your vehicles to do, and the wingsuit was just a system that I didn't need to engage with that much. It was like, you tout this, and I can effectively ignore it. That sucks, and that's not good game design. And it was just more of a disappointment for me than, like, the worst game I've ever played. There's vast other kind of ones. Deadly Premonition. Like, that one, I actively had to fucking fight the game to actually play. This one, I had fights with it as well, but not to the extent that Deadly Premonition would. And... odd. Nuts as shit, man. Nuts as shit. Now, would I recommend playing these games? Yeah. The first 4, definitely, especially if you can get them on, like, backwards compatibility or PC. Now, granted, they're aged, alright? And, of course, there's going to be ones that you're going to like better than the others. Saints Row, first one is the weird kind of proof of concept. Second one is where they get the grittiness and really kind of find their identity with stuff. So if you gravitate towards that one, I definitely understand that. Otherwise, if you're more into kind of fun gameplay that kind of works with it, and just kind of irreverent, kind of like, I'm gonna fucking do what I want, that's where the third and the fourth one kind of get to. This one, if your first shot is with this one, I feel for you. This does not represent the Saints Row series very well. And if this represents the direction, that sucks. And that's not me being like, oh god, it's woke or whatnot. No, fuck that shit. It's not. It's just dated concept and dated memes, which I understand is nuts because of just how fast things get through, and not exploring their characters and not understanding how to thoughtfully pace what's going on, and instead doing filler and everything, which makes me believe that their development time on this was misspent and also, like, condensed and crunched too much to get this out. Because the bugs needed better fixing, and the story just wasn't as good as the other ones. I remember the characters of Shawnee, of Pierce, Johnny Gat, the boss, Julius. Everything that kind of goes down with Saints Row 2, the third, and the fourth one. You're dealing with such crazy kind of characters and situations. This one is as if a studio was tasked with making a Saints Row copy, but the fucked up thing is, it's the actual studio that made Saints Row, and it just feels like a soulless kind of copy. Of like, oh yeah, here we go. Because at the end of, like, the third one and the fourth one, you get the Saints kind of dancing to certain kind of music and everything. But the end of this one is done to Love Shack. And I'm like, even if you're doing this for, like, certain kind of audience or whatnot, you would pick something that would work within the realm of, like, the characters and what they grew up with. And they karaoke Love Shack, and it just is not executed and done well. It's just jarring, goes on too long, and just wasn't kind of funny or enjoyable. I just sat through it. I'm like, alright. And it's sad for me, and disappointing. And I definitely give Volition another chance. Like, this wasn't the... I'd want to see what other kind of stuff they would do, but with Agents of Mayhem not performing well, this not performing well, I don't know what else for them to do other than to create some other kind of game, maybe sit and put this on hiatus for a little bit, and maybe come back with another one. I hesitate to say to reboot it again, but I think you kind of have to do that and change up what would work, because with this, it worked out with what was kind of going on with changing up how it worked versus GTA, with, like, the whole Saints thing and fighting different kind of criminal empires and, like, gathering territory and stuff. You got that kind of strategic kind of aspect of what was kind of going on. And I think if you refine that kind of gameplay loop and make it better and understand how to design it in a different kind of way, this could be a really good series for that. But they didn't do that here, and I don't know if they will do that. Now, I would definitely recommend Saints Row 2, the third, and the fourth one. Gat Out of Hell's only if you're really into it, because I would say that one's more bare bones than this one, but you run around as fucking Johnny Gat, you fight the devil, so that's still puts it above this. I mean, concept-wise. Otherwise, it's kind of like the most bare bones kind of gameplay kind of thing, even though it introduces some interesting kind of powers and shit that you go with, because it still kind of modifies the effect of like the superpowers from the fourth one. Yeah, and this one was interesting because I wanted to talk about what kind of went wrong with this reboot, i.e., they just did the same shit with worse characters and worse story, and how it was executed and presented, and also worse combat. Like, I didn't really have fun with the combat. There were introducing frustrations that didn't need to be there. There's a difference between challenging combat because I'm testing my skills, I'm learning how things work and systems in the game. That's a different kind of thing. This, it's just, okay, I don't know if that character was supposed to have killed me like that. And then you're wondering if some kind of glitch or bug is what kind of fucked you over, rather than you fucking up and learning from it. I can take that. I can say, yep, I fucked that up. Or in certain instances, I'm like, oh god, I think I got stuck in the ceiling because I accidentally drove like a hover bike into a room and I tried to get off and I'm like tumbling. I'm like, ah shit, fuck. Like, I just tried to get off of it and try to get out, but it kind of thunder launched me into some shit. I'm like, oh god. So, if you're into GTA, I think this would be a nice kind of little diversion. If you could find them or do anything with them. I sadly would not recommend the newest gen because there's better games out there. There's better series out there to kind of like go through and understand and have fun with. Now, if you had fun with the reboot, that's cool. I had some enjoyment with it too. I saw glimmers of Nina, Kev, Eli that they could have done really well. And your boss character definitely fits within the same kind of boss character that we've had in the other Saints Row games that you could have with yourself kind of insert and everything. That really wasn't a problem. It was all the kind of anchor points around. It's like you go to Saints Row the 3rd or Saints Row the 4th or even 2, and 1 you're a silent protagonist, but like in 2, and the boss character is a good one, Anchor, but then you've got the tendrils and the spokes that work out with all the other characters, and then you get invested in the stories. There just wasn't enough done to invest me with these characters. And that sucks. So, the other ones I would definitely recommend. We'll have to see what happens with the rest of the Saints Row series. So, those are my opinions on the Saints Row video game series. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you like it, if you don't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.